episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy. Of course, we are the podcast that do bring you a wide variety of topics. We have a diverse set of guests that come on to help us out with some things that we may not have thought about, and maybe even give us some tips on some things that are keeping us up at night. And today is no different. We are fortunate enough to have Wendell Jordan. He is a 10-year sales and marketing professional. He is currently the owner of Jordan Marketing Consultants. It's a digital agency focused on high ROI marketing solutions. As an SEO consultant and web design professional, he helps local businesses get more sales, retain more customers, and build brand awareness. Wendell, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to be with us.
Yes, sir.
So, we talked a little bit. I think it's interesting. We really want to hit on the local SEOs, kind of what you focus on. But before we jump off into that, tell us a little bit about, how did you migrate into the space? How did you find yourself the owner of a marketing agency?
Right. So, excuse me. I won't give you the long version. I'll give you the best, the most condensed one. So, okay. As you mentioned, I started off in sales. So I was originally a door-to-door sales rep selling cable in New York. And I had a friend who designed websites who needed a salesperson. So we started reaching out to small businesses, and the demand exceeded his ability. So I had to learn how to do a little bit of design.
Okay.
Right. And then over time, him and I, we considered ourselves partners, rather. We had a partnership. And over time, it started to get to the point where we were going in two different directions, and I started doing things by myself. Yeah. Right. And one thing that I noticed was when we would build websites, nothing would come of it. Right. Like, we'd have these awesome, very aesthetically beautiful websites, but they really weren't generating a lot of traffic. There was no ROI at all. And I started doing some research. So I started looking into what SEO meant, especially, coming from a space where the internet has matured so much from, the days of the 90s where SEO was just putting words on pages and,
right.
People came to it. So I had to do a lot of research. And then eventually I got to the point where I realized, because I enjoy working with local small business, that local SEO made the most sense, because SEO is a little different. They're kind of in the same space, but local SEO really speaks to my ideal customer.
Yeah, and I think that's mistaken, that a lot of the local businesses don't really think, the people that are selling products or services across the U.S., we think about it because we want to attract, somebody from California, but that local guy that's on the corner, they think that, the sign out front in brick and mortar, that's really all that they have to offer. And I was going to say, first off, I may need to get you to come back for an episode just on being a door-to-door salesman in New York City. I can only imagine what a tough gig that must have been.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Oh man, we can talk about that for hours. Yeah. I can tell you so many stories, man. That was my first sales job. I had no intention on being in sales. Yeah. I just answered a Craigslist ad, and I was married at the time, and my wife said, I said, but it's sales. And she was like, well, try it. You like talking to people. And I ended up enjoying it. I loved it, in fact. So we'll definitely have to, we can definitely pin that.
Yeah.
That would be.
Yeah. And the other thing you mentioned, I think, of course, we're in 2021 now, but, back in the 90s, I guess SEO was actually having a web page. It's like if you had a web page that had maybe a picture on it, you were in the top 5% of what was going on. And, you were probably one of 10 other people that had a web page up. So it was like easy to find you. But, nowadays it's so crowded and there's so much noise out there. I mean, there's just, even for local businesses, there's, we have a pizza place on every corner. So anyway, let's kind of talk about that. I mean, what are some of the challenges that you see for these local guys, that may have a brick and mortar trying to do some SEO work?
Right. So the pizza place is always a perfect example. Pizza place, a gym, because there's a national franchise to those, and you also have to be able to identify if you're Mario's Pizza, Domino's and Pizza are not your competitors. Luigi's Pizza is your competitor.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really the place that you need to be looking at. What are they doing? That's one of the biggest misconceptions that local business have is
Yeah.
we're not competing for uh, the market share from the large franchise or the national franchise.
Right.
One, each franchisee has a certain budget. The corporate office makes sure that they come up high in search. They're also running ads, which may or
Yeah.
may not be in Mario Pizza's budget. But the most important parts to it when trying to etch some form of local SEO is to use the free things first, right? Like making sure that you're on Yelp, that you're claimed on Yelp, right?
Yeah.
Being sure that you have a Google My Business page, and make sure that it's claimed, right? Because that's the key part is claiming it
Yeah.
because every business can have one, but if it's not claimed, then you don't have the rights to it,
Yeah.
and you're not able to post and update customers and change your hours and do all the other important things that you want to make sure people know about your business.
Yeah. And
Um,
I was going to just interject for a minute. People, I mean, I think as a business owner, you really need to understand it. We just had a situation, it was about a week ago. It was it was a nail salon place that my girlfriend goes to. And she was like,
okay,
what is the name of that place? I can't think of it because she needed to call up there. So we Google mapped and we got to the complex, the building that they were in,
right,
but their name wasn't listed on there.
yep,
And
that's very
so,
common.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
very common.
So I guess
Yeah.
that's just a function of them not going and claiming that.
So it's not so that's actually a totally separate component.
Oh, is it?
So
Oh,
making
okay.
sure,
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay.
making sure that you're actually on maps. So like there's Apple Maps, there's Google Maps. Believe it or not, MapQuest is still a part
Oh my
of
gosh.
Map
Yeah.
Citation,
Okay.
right? Right. So, and even with that, I can tell you some MapQuest stories from back when you had to print it out.
Yeah, exactly.
But being sure that, like, especially when you're in a shopping center, because some locations have high turnover. So, are you still listed as Stacy's Plumbing Service, or is it now, Maria's Nail Salon?
Yeah.
My first encounter with local SEO before I even knew what it was, honestly, I moved to St. Louis from New York, and I needed a haircut. So I look up barbershops. Now, the first part about it is barbershop is not it's a universal term, right?
Right.
So some barbershops cut a grain of hair that's more like yours. Some barbershops cut grains of hair that are more like mine.
Right.
I never thought of it that way, right? Like was never something that crossed my mind. And then the other part to it was making sure that the barbershop was open because they actually had pretty high turnover.
Right.
But it took me 2 hours to
Oh,
find a
wow.
barbershop the first time I was in St. Louis. First time I needed a haircut in St. Louis, I spent 2 hours finding a barbershop. And that was when the very first time the light bulb went off and I said, this may be a problem for small businesses,
Right.
right?
Right.
So again, when you talk about being able to find someone, usually barbershops, hair salons, nail salons, they're usually in shopping centers. Very rarely are they standalone locations, right?
Right.
You want to be sure if you're that owner, you go to Google My Business, you register your business firstly. And then there's something called local citations, which we don't have enough time to go through.
Yeah.
But again, talking about that Google map it's a citation. So
Okay.
a citation, unlike in the legal term, right? It's just a mark, right?
Okay.
So in SEO, a citation is just a mark on the internet. So you
Okay.
want to make sure that all of those things are aligned. So even if you just type in so and so's nail salon, hopefully you can come up because some business names are very similar throughout the U.S.
All right.
Right? But hopefully, if someone puts so and so nail salon in Houston, Texas, or I'm more specific, Kema, right, in
Mhm.
Kema, Texas, you come up. But that all goes into how you're making sure that you're being found on the internet. But those
Okay.
are all things that we don't think about even as business owners. Because
Right.
again, it took me 2 hours to find a barbershop, and you would think barbershop would be relatively easy to find.
Exactly. So, how, like, from a consumer's point of view, I like to always be local. I mean, because,
Okay.
I live in Fort Worth, Texas. So, and sometimes when I do a search, it defaults to another zip code, I guess if it's cellular, maybe where it's
Yes.
connecting or back to the office, that the central office it goes to. But anyway, so when I don't want to drive 30 minutes across town to do business, I want to be sure I go right up here. And are most consumers pretty much that way? I would assume that they would rather deal with somebody that's right in their neighborhood, even if they're part of a big city.
So that's a really good question. So there's two parts to that consumer journey. The
Okay.
first part is locality, right?
Mhm.
So if you are a local consumer, you typically, like you said, you don't want to drive past 10 nail salons to get to the one that Google said you should go to.
Right.
So that is really important. The way I used to describe local SEO was I am the near me part, right? So
Right.
usually you put near me or you put your city or your zip code. If you don't put anything, then like you said, sometimes it'll default to wherever your IP address is pointed
Yeah.
to. The other part to that consumer journey is the reviews. So
Yes.
being sure that once you get your Google My Business together, um, Yelp is a little tricky because they don't let you solicit reviews. Believe it or not, they'll hide them. But Google My Business is pretty free form. So as customers come in, or as they're leaving, maybe you want to be sure that you're requesting reviews, right? If
Yeah.
you're a place that gathers email addresses, it would behoove you to be sure to send out some emails asking people to come, go to your Google My Business page or even your Facebook page. But again, just to go back to the initial question that you asked, that locality is really important. So being sure that you're listed in the location that you're in helps someone like yourself find the nail salon that isn't 30 minutes away.
Right.
Like it's really the detail, right?
Yeah.
It's detail and making sure that if you're 2200 Suite B, that's exactly how you're listed on all places that your business is located, right?
Yeah.
So that Google sees it as one uniform place. Google doesn't understand 2200 2200 Suite B.
Yeah.
Google sees that as two different places, even if it has the same business name.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So one of the you had mentioned, the corporate. Let's go back to the pizza example for a minute. We've
sure.
got the Domino's, Pizza Hut. So thinking that if we're a local, one shop person, that we can even rank on a Google page. Is that even possible when you have, the Goliaths like the corporates that they're pouring their money in to make sure that their brands list on the top, and so the local franchisor, he benefits from the dollars that they spend nationally. But so
Right,
if I'm that small mom and pop,
right.
do I have a chance to get up on the first page somewhere?
Absolutely.
Do you? Okay.
So yeah, absolutely. So it's really just defining the goal, right? Um, again, when we're talking about businesses, the locality is what's going to allow you to get on that first page.
Okay.
There's only going to be but so many Domino's, but so many Pizza Huts, just because of the way that their franchise ship works,
Yeah.
where they're only going to take up but so much space on the map between locations for the most part, right?
Okay.
So when you're thinking about, just to use the pizza example, when you're thinking about that, as the site is designed, right? Because it's not just going to be making sure that the Google My Business is put together. You're also going to need a website. The biggest misnomer is the Grub Hubs and all the other things that give you those one page menus are going to act as the the website that you never needed.
Okay.
It's untrue,
Yeah.
right? Because you don't control what
Yeah.
information gets put on there. You usually have to request to have certain things changed. Um, but in order to get on that first page, because this is the way search is going to look, it's going to have those franchisees, right? All those national chains. The delivery services, believe it or not, are actually probably going to come up second, and then you're going to be somewhere towards the middle or the bottom, depending on how big the city you live in.
Yeah.
So you have to accept the fact that you're never going to be number one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For a pizza near me. But again, when we go back to the nail salon example, even when we talk about the pizza shop, usually we have some idea of what the pizza shop is called, unless we're relatively new, and then we may say we want brick oven pizza. So we want to be sure that when we're putting together that website, brick oven pizza is something that's mentioned, because
Yeah.
now Domino's isn't even in the conversation anymore,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like now you've positioned yourself as the local brick oven pizza shop.
Yeah.
So it's things like that that are very realistic, but it's just defining those goals as you're putting together that local SEO
Yeah.
campaign.
And you mentioned platforms for just a minute. I think this is something I heard years ago is, we have to be careful how we structure our platforms because, you do a website, you basically have control. What, you can put brick oven, you can do all the stuff you need. But if we rely on other platforms, even if, we may be able to get some information in there, but if they make changes to any of their policies or do anything, you could be left out in the dark if that's all that you have been relying on, whereas with your own website, that's an asset that you control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, you just stated it perfectly. I mean, one other part to SEO and local SEO is making sure that you're creating content,
Right.
right? So if we're thinking about those other platforms, and again, there's nothing wrong with having the Grub Hubs and stuff like that because they're awesome SEO tools because they pay thousands of dollars to make sure that they rank high.
Right.
So you will still come up, and the name of the game is always to get business. But when you're talking about your specific brand, right? Because it's really controlling your brand and the voice that your brand projects, regardless of the type of business that you're in. Because again, you don't want to be misunderstood as just a pizza shop if you're a brick oven,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or if you're a very traditional pizza shop and you don't necessarily do all the chicken parms and the pastas and all those other kind of things. Maybe you have, and again, being a New Yorker, maybe you've got a New York slice for somebody like
Yeah.
me, right? Like maybe you sell it by the slice.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways that you can position yourself when you control what information is being shared. Because
Right.
very rarely by the slice is going to be something that a place is going to be listing, right? Um, I've been a few places looking for a slice of pizza when I was relatively new to leaving New York, and I quickly learned that most people buy them by the pie. I did not know this growing up. I thought everyone bought pizza one slice at a time, right?
Yeah.
So being able to have that information available on your site, you can kind of move it and position it the way that you like. You can also do cool things like announce different types of pizza that you're doing, right? Like, I was told a couple of days ago somebody had a chicken and waffle pizza, and it was I don't know, but it had syrup on it. I don't think that I would ever eat it, but it was an option,
Right.
right? It
Right.
was an option. So, it was. I think I forgot how they described it, but I think it had little bits of waffle on it, some chicken, like fried chicken, and again,
Yeah.
if you're the only person, if you're the only business serving chicken and waffle pizza, that may be something that you want to announce. You may want to write a blog about how you guys came about even putting together that concoction,
Yeah.
right? But those are all the things that you can control when you're in charge of the message, as opposed to some of the delivery services, or even if you're talking about Yelp, where you can't really post much other than what's within the parameters of what they decide is okay. And
Right.
again, not saying
Yeah.
any of these platforms are bad. Like Yelp has changed immensely in the last 10 years. They used to allow way more information to be shared, whereas now they've segmented each piece of it into a premium service. So
Hmm.
on some Yelp pages, you can't put your logo unless you're willing to pay for it.
Interesting. Yeah. So, kind of going in order, we've talked about making sure we claim our business on Google. We've talked about having that website, but, and we've kind of touched on that content, but, how important is refreshing, getting that out there? I mean, I think people want to deal with people that they like. People want to deal with people that seem to be like them. And so, I think the owners getting their story out there. How did I get here? Why do we do this? It's been a family tradition for 100 years, or those are very important messages to keep out there. Correct?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And again, it just goes back to your choice of content delivery. Something else that I think is key to mention because it is important to local SEO is social media, right? Those
Yeah.
social platforms are important, and being sure that you're not saturating them with the coupons, right? Like you said, being able to tell your brand story, being
Right.
able to talk about, because I mean, you go to some places, they may sell pizza. Just to stick to this pizza analogy because
Yeah.
I think pizza's everywhere.
Yeah. Right.
If you're an Italian restaurant, you may offer pizza, but you may not be a pizzeria,
Right.
right? So you want to make sure that that's understood. You may be listed under pizzeria, but that may not necessarily be where the space in which you fall. You may have some niche items like gluten-free crust. You may offer a vegan crust. Like you may have a few different options that allow for you to have a story to be told.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something to be mentioned. But again, it just goes back to being able to control the brand voice
Right.
that you're giving out. And again, having a website, Google My Business is probably the second most important to the website, right? I think that those are one and one A
Yeah.
because Google My Business gives you a lot of flexibility in being able to post content. So that's another thing. Google My Business allows you to post content. I don't think a lot of business owners know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, the days of the static web page are over, and I think that we have to always be refreshing. And it also it helps because the way that you write it, when you get an expert like yourself to help write that content, because again, as the years have gone by, Google has gotten smart. Used to, back in the olden days, you could write an about us. Pizza. Yeah, we serve pizza. I like pizza. They like pizza. They come here for pizza. You could just stuff.
You'd be at the top. You'd be at the tip top right
exactly.
there.
Exactly.
Just say pizza 3 times and you'd be good to go.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just
that was SEO.
Yeah, you keyword stuff the page and it was good. But now, Google is like Facebook. They've built their own jail that, they will put you in Google jail if they deem that you have, stepped over that line there.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, there is a such thing as having your site completely removed from search.
Right.
Like that is a real thing. I've talked to a couple of business owners about it. They're like, really? You could be unsearchable? I'm like, yeah, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
If you're deemed as spam, it's a process to get that label removed from you.
Yeah.
But like you just said, I mean, it's one of those things where if you're really thoughtful, because you have to be sure that there's a couple other parts to the actual website piece, right? Like something that has become a very common term is web vitals. So being sure that the site loads, at a relatively fast speed, being sure that your images are optimized for mobile and a bunch of other pieces that go into that.
Yeah.
But making sure that, like you said, the page, the on-page stuff, like being sure you're talking about being and I don't want to use, this is a bad example, but the number one brick oven pizza shop in Kima, right? Like, and again, it's subjective. Google does not hurt you to say you're number one. But like you said about trustworthiness, if it's me, I want to know who deemed it number one, right?
Right. Yeah. It's always better to have somebody else deem you number one than deem yourself.
Exactly. Right. So, those are all the part of that on-site SEO where you talk about where you're located. If you have more than one location, you got to separate those by page, right? Like you can't talk about 4 locations all on one page.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. So, a couple things to the importance today of images and videos. I think we all probably understand it, but I'll let you just talk about that. We've got to have the correct language, the correct wording to help. But, I've been told in the past that, pictures are like leaving breadcrumbs to your website, and videos are like leaving chocolate covered videos to your website. That, videos tend to rank higher. But, something a guy brought up to me one time I never thought about is social media. Let's take that for instance, that, you post, hey, we're having, 2-for-1 pizza night or whatever. If you write that out in text, it's, let me get over here. You take up about this much real estate when people are scrolling down through their feeds, where if you have a picture or video, now all of a sudden you've expanded it to, this amount of real estate. So.
Right.
Yeah. So
certainly.
Just talk about the importance of the videos. And, I'll speak from my personal point of view, and then I'll let you weigh in as an expert. I like to see the reality. I don't want to see scripted. I don't want to see it like it was way overproduced. Man, I want to see the guy with his cell phone, saying, look, here we are in our kitchen cooking some pizza. So talk about that a little bit. It's good to do that.
So something that the last piece that you touched on is perfect. It's the authenticity, right?
Yes.
Something that has become way more available is stock photos. Stock video has even become, cheaply available nonetheless, right? Like once upon a time, if you wanted stock photography, it would cost you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in order to get access to a portfolio of photos, where now there's a bunch of places where you can get it for relatively cheap.
Right.
So you want to be sure that you're taking the time as the business owner or assigning it to someone that works there. Like you said, taking pictures in the environment, right? We're going to stick to the pizza shop, taking pictures of customers enjoying the food. If you do have a sit down location, if you don't, make sure that you have a picture of the storefront, so that if they're looking at it from Google, they're not confusing Mario East with Mario West, right?
Right.
Because that's a really important piece.
Yeah.
There's also, speaking to Google, there's a couple of services that they specifically offer where, and I'm sure we've all used it, where you can look around the location inside. So if you click the 3D view, you can, if the business owner has taken the photography, you can actually walk through as though you're in the store or in the restaurant in that moment. So
Interesting.
that's another cool thing. When you talk about the video component, and again, the pizza, I love pizza, so I'm
Yeah.
definitely not saddened by the fact that this is the description.
Right.
But, if you can get an action, and again, like you said, not even overproduced, but I remember being a kid going into the local pizza shop that was in my community, and it was the coolest thing ever to watch them make the pizza,
Right.
right? Because we would watch them, toss the dough, do everything, make sure that they did the crust and everything, put the sauce on it, but they did everything right in front of us. So if you can capture that, right, like that would be something that would be,
Yeah.
again, when you go back to it, you can say, we do everything, from scratch.
Right.
Sounds great. But if I can watch a video of this pizza spinning in the air, even if it doesn't have a bunch of production value on it, it's something that makes me go, okay, I see this now.
Yeah.
I don't have to picture it in my mind. I can actually watch you take care of it.
Yeah, and sometimes we also too we have to figure out who not only who our customer is, but who is driving that decision. And so,
Yes.
Mom and dad pay for the pizza for sure. But if you've got some videos, of the pizza tossing, and you got a couple kids that are looking at that saying, "Hey, I want to go see it." They're going to be on mom and dad like, "Hey, we really need to go. I want to go see this guy do this." And so,
Certainly.
kind of figuring out who are we really targeting with these messages to who influences the decision, not necessarily who's paying for it.
Right. I had a conversation with a client last week, and that was the statement. We were talking about doing some outreach as far as article writing opportunities.
Yeah.
And I said the question you have to ask yourself is the decision maker. Who is the decision maker? Who is the person that makes a decision, and then where do they get their information from? Right. Like that's how we decide where this information needs to be fed to.
Right.
A perfect example: there's a fudge place in Kansas City, Missouri, and during certain times of the day, you can watch them make the fudge. Right.
Oh, wow.
And it's a known thing in the area. I don't necessarily know that they publicize it on their website, but like you said, it would be, if they don't have it, it's an awesome opportunity for someone to get some video, because it's a real big window and the machine's right there and all the cutting and everything happens right there. Right. It almost looks like you can reach out and touch it. That's how close it is to the window.
Yeah.
But like if they could get, because it's supposed to be like a family thing. So, if they don't have that footage, they're doing themselves a disservice. Again, I don't know that they do or they don't, but it's a perfect example of being able to show how it's a family environment. It's something that your kids are going to marvel at. There was something else that you mentioned, or if you're a place like, again, from my childhood, there was another pizza shop in the community. We liked them better only because they had a couple of video games, right? They had a couple of arcade games. So again, if you're able to show, even if you only got 2 arcade games, if you point the camera at the right angle, it looks like you may have more, right? So,
Yeah.
you can angle it to where it looks like, the kids have something to do. It's not just, eat it as fast as you can and run back out into the world. So definitely making sure that you capture the environment and understand who the people are that are going to make the decisions.
Yeah, and just as we talk through that, I think, dads are probably the least people we need to target, because, all we're there for is to pay for it. It's the children are the significant other. They're the ones.
Right. Absolutely. We are definitely last on the totem pole for the decision.
So
earlier, we're the navigator, like you said. We may be the financier of the adventure, but we're very rarely we're very rarely pointing the ship.
So you mentioned earlier about
we got a little lag there.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned earlier about the reviews. So
yep.
And one thing I will say is reviews. Even a negative review doesn't have to be a negative. We could turn it into a positive, but I'll let you talk about how we handle that.
Right. So online reputation, it is paramount to local SEO because, again, in that customer experience, it's really the second piece to it, right? Like once you find the place, you start to make that decision based on the reviews. A negative review is always subjective, right? Some people live and die by reviews as far as consumers go.
Right.
But when you have a negative review, it gives you an opportunity to address the issue, right? Maybe they caught you on a bad day. Maybe they just had a bad experience. Maybe the employee that caused the bad experience has since been removed from payroll. So that's something that you may want to mention, right? Or maybe you're under new management.
Yeah.
There's so many different things that you can do with reviews if they are negative. But the main part is to be sure that you're asking for reviews, right? You don't ever want to start asking for reviews after the first 1 star. You want to start asking for reviews as soon as you start claiming these pages. Push people to them to write reviews. Again, Yelp has their own guidelines, so it's a little tricky for Yelp, but especially Google My Business, a lot of and again, we talk about old internet days. You used to be able to check into places and they would give you, a discount if you checked in. You can still offer those kind of things depending on the platform that the business is being checked in or even reviewed. But even if you're willing to give a free fountain drink, again, to stick to the pizza shop, if you're willing to give a free fountain drink, if they write an honest review, because you don't ask for the 5-star, ask for an honest review.
Yeah.
If you give me an honest review, get a free fountain drink next time you come in.
Yeah.
It'll help incentivize people to get it done, and it helps you bring new customers in because they see that people actually enjoy it here.
Yeah. And I think it could go either way, the way that we handle that negative review, because I've seen some local people like, hey, I don't, you're an idiot for even it's like, oh my gosh. It's like, okay, we had a marginal situation and then they just made it explode where it's terrible. But the other thing is, as a business owner, if somebody that has employees, I need and want that feedback because I can't be everywhere at every minute. So if something's going bad or it's not right for the customer, I like to know. And so I think we can present it as, be a positive. Just say, hey, look, thanks for bringing that to my attention. We've made some changes in our system and we've done this or we've done that. But definitely address it. The other thing you can't do, I don't think, is you can't ignore it and just pretend it doesn't exist. I think you have to address it.
Absolutely. The other thing too that you mentioned that I do think is important as people traverse the internet, right? Because just because I'm the person sharing the information doesn't mean everyone's going to call my phone, right, or email me. Be very leery of the places that are offering you the ability to filter those reviews. So there's a lot of companies that will do review gathering for you. So they'll set up an email system, an email sequence, and if a user clicks 4 or 5 stars, you can usually set the parameters. There's a term for it, but I can't think of it. But you can set the parameter. So if someone does 4 or 5 stars, it'll publish. Yeah. If they do 3 or less, it'll reroute it back to you so that you can help remedy it. That is something that every platform looks down upon. And if it's ever found out that people are doing any kind of filtering of because there's a specific term for it, and forgive me for not remembering it, but just be really thoughtful with that. Any company that offers that, I would run in the other direction because there are lots that are solely based on reputation management, but their intention should be genuine reputation management, right? Like not skewing the narrative so that you're only a 5 or a 4-star location, right? Like if you got some 3 stars, people should know, right? Because you want your customer to be informed. But like you said, it gives you an opportunity to address the fact that your imperfections are honest and you're willing to move forward through them.
So how can you manage that? I don't know a lot about the Yelps and the stars and all that, but okay, let's just say I'm your pizza competitor, a couple blocks away. So I'm going to slip by there, have a piece of pizza, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm going home and like, oh my God, the service was terrible. It wasn't even like pizza. That was more like a vegetable plate and, just really railing. So how would a legitimate business owner kind of defend themselves against things like that?
Unfortunately, in the last 2 years, you see a lot more of that on Google My Business, especially because it's becoming a more prominent tool. The only thing that you can, the first part, again, is start getting reviews before anyone else writes them, right? Yeah. So start asking for reviews before you get the first bad one so that hopefully it can balance things out. Yeah. And you can report reviews that you believe are spam or any kind of malicious intent. So
Yeah.
you can report those. Usually, it takes some time, but if there's some validity to it, definitely answer. If there is no validity to it, you should answer in a very open-ended question to give the person an opportunity to either explain why
Yeah.
the pizza was, like you said, a veggie plate.
Yeah.
So like oh, okay, well, what did you order, right?
Right.
Try to get them to make it a conversation. And in the absolute worst case scenario, let's just say nothing comes of it. Maybe you respond again and you say, hey, we're willing to offer some sort of remedy to this solution.
Right.
Shoot us an email so that when the next person sees this review, they see that you do care.
Yeah.
Even if you know that it's a phony review, you're at least taking the effort,
Yeah.
because unfortunately, you know, John Smith is not going to know that the pizza shop around the corner wrote the bad review,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like so
Yeah.
you definitely have to. You still have to address it. You can report it, and again, before everything else, as soon as you claim that location, start asking people to write some reviews for you.
Yeah, not just, from my consumer's perspective, and, I've been around for quite a while, so I realize every day is not going to be perfection in business. I mean, it's just sometimes it's stuff they do, sometimes it's beyond their control. So when I see a negative review, I don't necessarily run the other way, but like you said, it's like if the person is willing to try to make it right, like, hey, we're sorry that happened, come back in, we'd be glad to replace it, then I feel very comfortable that, if I go to this place, have a bad experience, they're going to try their best to make it right. And I think that gets back to the whole, don't take a match and light a bonfire with it by, attacking the customer, because
No,
that just
never.
that never has a good outcome. Never.
Right.
It just
Never.
goes
Never.
bad.
No. No. Right. If your response to a bad review is, well, you were a bad customer, then
Yeah, right. Oh my god.
I think
Yeah.
I think you're trending down anyway. So I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, there isn't much else that can be done.
So we've talked a lot about website. Oh, I know what I wanted to touch on for just a minute. Content. So when we talk about writing
Okay.
content, the other thing that's, I think, I'll let you speak to, is being able to cut that content up and use it multiple times. If you write I don't know, 500, 1200, I guess we'll start there. I don't think Google indexes under 500. So I'll let you kind of give a little bit of the parameters on that, and then being able to take bits and pieces out of that and get a lot of mileage out of this one blog that we may have written.
So the first part to it is, believe it or not, Google has no preference. At this point in the age of Google, it has way more to do with the context of the content,
Okay.
right? So in theory, you really can't write anything under 300 or so words that would make much, if any, sense,
Yeah.
right? But anything under five it's usually the best. It's the most palatable, right? Like anything five or better, excuse me,
Yeah.
is the most palatable, right? Like 500 words really isn't a lot. You can usually touch on enough points to make it make sense to the users. That's really what it's about at this point in Google's understanding of content. Right. It's all about the relevance to what someone's looking for.
Right.
So now when you talk about that blog post, right, or some piece of content that's on the site, maybe it's just an FAQ, you can, again, depending on if it's an in-house thing or if you've hired an agency, you can create an infographic based on the points that you talk about from that blog post. You can take a snippet from it and put it on your social platforms. You can even break it up, or I should say, you could take smaller snippets and turn it into several posts on social media. So again, just to speak to the pizza shop, right? Let's say the pizza shop writes, the five most ordered pizza toppings, at our location, right? Just throwing that out there. So maybe you do 5 different posts, right? Maybe you do that over the course of a week. Every other day you post about, which is a new one for me. I most recently discovered this pepperoni and pineapple. That's a
Interesting.
thing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. I'm not a big
It is.
pineapple fan
It's
on my
good though.
pizza.
I didn't think
Is
it
it?
would be
Was
good.
it? Okay.
No, well, yeah, it's actually good. It's actually good. It's got like a salty sweet kind of thing going. But again, that in itself is a post, right? So
Right.
when you say, well, yeah, people have started ordering pineapple and pepperoni. What is your favorite, right? Then you make it something that gives people the opportunity to talk about how much they wouldn't do pineapple on pizza, right? So, but that would be the ideal situation where you create, when you're thinking about the content that you're going to write, especially when it's a blog content, you think about it, how can we turn this into smaller pieces,
Yeah.
right? So one part, again, infographic, right? Depending on the business type. Maybe you make it and they call it a listicle, right? So maybe the infographic is just, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? With the question at the bottom. What is your favorite topping,
Yeah.
right? And just kind of breaking it down that way
Yeah.
would be a perfect situation when it came to content.
Yeah, because we want to drive engagement. We want to put things out there that make people want to comment, start a conversation. That's the optimal. But talking about Google for a minute, part of their job or part of their mission is they want to make the experience better for
Yes.
their search people, and so that's why all these things are so important. Because if you if you have something kind of funky on your website, they're going to be leery about sending people to you because they are worried about, they want to give their search people the very best experience that they can get.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're gonna. I was like, oh, funky. It's a perfect description. So the funky pieces to your website, right? If
Yeah.
it's really slow,
Yeah.
if you don't have an SSL certificate, which is just that little padlock in
Right.
the URL, right? Once upon a time, an SSL certificate only mattered if you were selling things.
Right.
But today, an SSL certificate means this site is less likely to be hacked. It means that whatever information you input is less likely to be taken,
Right.
right?
Right.
It means that it is secure.
Right.
So little things like the speed, the SSL certificate, also being sure that your images and just the text as a whole is responsive,
Yeah.
right? So if you're, believe it or not, there are some clients I have that actually most of their traffic still comes from desktop, right?
Wow.
So yeah, so their mobile optimization isn't as important as say some of my other clients where it's like 80% mobile.
Yeah.
So I got to be sure that the imagery works right, that the words aren't, giant fonts, on your screen, right? And even
Yeah.
when you talk about on a because technically it's desktop and then you have like tablet and then you have phone, right?
Yeah.
Because you usually just say mobile device, but that's so subjective now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, being sure that your site is responsive, that all falls into that funky space. The understanding with Google is, in what context are you helping our users,
Yeah.
right? So again, if someone's looking for pizza shop near me, right, and everything on your site talks about sausage, pepperoni, chicken, olives, you talk about fountain drinks, you talk about the ice cream that you serve, but you only say pizza one time in all 10 pages on your site.
Right.
The likelihood that that Google's going to send people your way is slim because you sound like a distributor of things, not necessarily a pizza shop, right?
Right. Right.
So you want to be sure that you're describing the sausage, the pepperoni as things that are available in your pizzeria, right? Like,
Yeah.
so just being sure that as you're creating content, you're thoughtful about who's going to read it. The same thing like you said about the video content or the imagery.
Yeah.
Who's the person that we want to understand what we're submitting for the world to view?
Right. Let's talk about YouTube for just a minute, because I think it's forgotten by a lot of people and myself. Back in the olden days when I first started this podcast, we did Skype. And then it became so difficult to connect. It was like, we spent 30 minutes connecting, and it's like, okay, we're both worn out. We can't even do this. So, kind of laid off of it. And then, somebody, once Zoom became prevalent, started back doing it again. But, depending on who you listen to, some people say YouTube could even be a bigger search engine than Google itself. But regardless, YouTube is probably a number 2 by far.
So.
I don't think there's anybody that would even be close. But the good thing about it is the how-tos. And so sticking with our pizza analogy, I was just thinking while you were talking, it's like, so the perfect video for them is, how do you build a perfect pizza? And then actually do the video of watching them, kind of go through this process. We do the dough, we do this.
Right.
I mean, how interesting would that be? Because maybe I want to make one at home, but then maybe I'm like, wow, that just made me hungry. I'm going to call these guys up.
So that last part is the most important piece right there. Is so for some businesses, the how-tos are are repellent to their customer, right? Yeah. So you want to make sure that the how-tos that you do offer, like you said, how do you make the perfect pizza? I do think that is a great thought, right? Yeah. Because again, if you've ever made pizza at home, once they get to like the third or fourth step, you may tap out and go, I'm gonna get what he's making or she's making, right? Like I'm gonna just go get that. But definitely being sure that on YouTube, because there is a certain level of optimization on YouTube as well. So it does give you the opportunity to, again, share more content, not only video, but also being able to have some actual keywords within your description of these videos, right? So that's important as well. And then again, also thinking about what is the goal of the content, right? Because you also don't want to be, we used to call it in sales, you don't want to throw up on the customer. That's what you used to tell, especially in door-to-door. You say you don't want to throw up on the customer, right? I got everything, I got this, I got that, I got that, right? You got to slow down, right? Yeah. So you want to be thoughtful with who is the person that you want to digest this video. Again, if you're catering to the kids, maybe you do something geared around the arcade that you have there, or again, if you have any other things that make you a little different than maybe some of the other pizza shops. The other part to it is when you're doing the description, you make sure that you're mentioning where you're located. Yeah. Because YouTube, unlike Google, that search really isn't going to be a local search. It's going to be a much broader spectrum. So again, going back into YouTube may not be the ideal space for every business, only because you're not going to be able to tailor the way that people are searching, and just depending on what industry you're actually servicing.
Yeah, and going back to the how-tos, I think you made it a point that we have to be careful we don't give things away that are definitely part of that. But sometimes I think too, when we have complex procedures, it's like the consumer was like, well, this would be easy for me to do. And then they watch this video and they're like, yeah, there's no way, there's no way I can do this. But absolutely. The other thing that, what I've used, and of course I'm trying to reach a national, my reach is national. So that does have something to do. But the other thing they have that's very reasonable is you can slice these videos like 30 seconds or less, and you do the inline. So like if you've ever gone to watch your favorite video, whatever, if it was a football clip or baseball, they have that little thing that you have to watch before. So, but you can do those. They're very inexpensive. And then, maybe it triggers somebody to be like, oh yeah, that would be a good fit for me. So anyway, there's just a lot of moving components to this.
Yeah. YouTube is definitely, like you said, when you say the olden days, right? Like YouTube once upon a time was not, now people call it the university of YouTube, right? Like you can find pretty much anything on YouTube now, but once upon a time it wasn't. But you definitely, if you can, you utilize it, right? But definitely have a thought, have a strategy in mind. Again, going back to, if you're doing it internally, having that conversation. If you're going to hire an agency like myself, then that's definitely a conversation that needs to be had before we start even considering video content. I have a friend who's a barber, and he does videos. But again, it's one of those things where, like, I don't know, like if you've ever tried to cut your own hair, it's not as simple as the barber makes it look. No. Right? So
my mom tried to cut mine when I was a kid, and that was the last home haircut I ever got. I had to go to school looking a little bit weird for the next day.
I've got a couple of those stories too. My mom cut my hair until I was like 10, man, and it wasn't that bad, but I had a couple of rough times. A couple of rough cuts. Yeah.
Something to think about too. I think when you said earlier about not throwing up on the customer, and we definitely don't want to do that, but we have to take a long-term approach to this whole marketing thing, and we have to realize that I don't really have to get everything I need out to you right this very instant. We could take that in smaller bites, and people tend to like, I do, reading. I like smaller pieces. I like smaller videos. I like just to get bite-sized pieces, and then I can decide, do I need to dig further to get more information or not? But I think to keep in mind is that don't feel like you have to cram everything into the one post or the one video. It's actually better to take it in snippets and do 10 of them. I mean, it just gives you a lot more mileage for that content.
Certainly. I agree with that 100%. I again, just to speak to this, to some of my ideologies come from my sales space, right? Yeah. So I've always been a sell the way I want to be sold kind of guy.
Right.
So to go back to the content piece where you talk about, having a certain word count. For me personally, I don't like to do over 1,000 words. Because over 1,000 words for me, I get lost. Like I'm like, if I scroll and this is 2,000, 2,500 words, I'm never going to read this. Right. And if I do, I'm going to skim over it as best I can. I'm never going to actually, digest this content. So it's definitely something to consider. And that again, or I shouldn't say again, that would go into understanding your user, right? So if it's something that you can break up into a series or parts, whether it be video or blog posts or whatever it is, you hit it right on the head. You definitely want to be thoughtful with where the end point is, right? Like, okay, I'm done explaining this. I'll let you come back for more later.
Yeah. And the device, it gets back to that. If I'm reading 1,000 words on a computer, I may be a little more likely. If I'm trying to read it on my phone, no way. Once it gets past this first screen, I'm like, okay, I'm pretty much done with that. It's like, I go one time. And that may be my short attention span, but I think it's, it seems to be more prevalent that these bite-sized pieces of text, video tend to work better, in certain situations. So don't be, I guess, talking to an expert like you could give them guidance, but don't be scared to do that because you can extend this message out.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. No, you hit it right on the head. Like you said, you also understanding how someone's digesting the content. For me personally, it doesn't matter what screen I'm on. If it's over 1,000 words, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I have so many articles and stuff and blog posts that I read that, like, the notion of reading, 10,000 words a day is like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not true. If I read 10,000 words a day, 1,000 words or 500 words at a time, I wouldn't even realize it.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
If it was a 2,500, word post, I'm like, I'm not. And the other thing too, to speak to being able to make it digestible, again, those infographics, and then also creating things like downloadables, right? So in some cases, you would call it a lead magnet. The pizzeria isn't really a great example of that. The only thing that you could possibly do is like is a menu, but no one ever asks you to give any information to get the menu because that would be counterintuitive to your sales process.
Right.
But being able to give something that's downloadable that they can then digest on their own time, right? Like if it's a top 10 for a plumber, right? The 10 things to make sure that your garbage disposal is functioning properly. Maybe you don't write the 2,500 words. Maybe you turn it into the same 2,500 words, but just make it a downloadable. So then I can look at it on my time and I'm not stuck on your website. And it also, like you said, gets to the point where, at some point you may go, I'm not gonna take this thing apart and clean it. I'm gonna pay somebody else to do this part.
Usually I'm the other way. I've already got it apart. Now I'm gonna have to hire somebody to put it all back together.
right, exactly.
The other good thing about the downloadables too is that now this person, if they print it out like some of us older people do, if they print it out, now they've got your name or your logo, your information in their house somewhere that they're going to have to see it more than once. So anytime you could put that put some kind of information with your name and contact information on it to a person, you're always much further ahead.
Yep. Yeah. And because they should have had to submit their phone, their email and their name, they should be going into an email list that then should give the opportunity to follow up on the garbage disposal experience and ask, is it in shambles on the floor yet, or what time should I come by?
That's right. Well, Wendell, I appreciate it. Appreciate you stopping by. Yes, is there anything else? We talked about websites, content, YouTube, reputation management. Anything else that we need to cover?
I don't think so. I made my notes here because I am a person who verbally is more of a 2,500 word kind of guy. So I
Yeah.
made sure to keep my notes. And I mean, we did fantastic, man. I mean, we covered some of the more important parts. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of underlining pieces,
Yeah.
again, like the citations and stuff like that. But,
Yeah.
you know, that's the kind of stuff you really got to reach out, you know, to
Yeah.
me, and we
Yeah.
can have a deeper conversation,
I
you know,
think
if a
the
person
one,
is
the
interested.
other part you touched on a little bit, but the power of that email list is don't be, I say don't be hesitant or scared to ask for those emails if you're giving somebody something of quality, because it helps you to reach out to them. And it's nice for the, maybe we're having a sale or maybe a special event, and so you have these people that you can drip on, because it maybe not so much in pizza but other things.
Right.
Let's talk about well, the garbage disposal. Okay, like right now mine's working great, so
Hmm.
I don't really, I'm not really listening to your message. I don't care. But if it's dripping on me where 3 days from now I got some garbage disposal issues, it's like, hey, I remember Wendell, he's been sending me stuff, or I've seen his ads, that you're top of mind, so I tend to go with you. Because what I see, like in high dollar items, is like, I called you up and said, hey Wendell, do you need my service or my product? And you're like, no, I don't. Okay, so I forget you, and then we're moving on
Right.
to the new guy. But we don't think that, maybe 3 months, 6 months, that you are actually going to need that, or you're going to want it, or you got the money available, whatever the roadblock may have been at the time. And so that's the importance of the emails and the dripping. But again, we have to structure it where we are educating, not just sales. Because this kills me.
No.
It's like, hey, Wendell, we talked last week. Are you ready yet? It's
Right.
like, okay, that's not what
Right.
I'm. Push out information about whatever your product or service is. Educate people, but stay in front of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. So again, to go back to the garbage disposal or just plumbing in general, right? Because that would be a
Yeah.
plumber. So even if you see the person that downloads the garbage disposal, depending on how that piece of content is put together and where they grabbed it from on the site, you should have it segmented in a way where, and again, this is not quite local SEO,
Yeah.
but you know, it's all marketing, so I
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Yeah.
But you should have it in a way where, again, you understand that this is a residential customer, right? So maybe it's a question of having content geared towards a residential client or a
Yeah.
residential, you know, consumer. If you're the plumber, so maybe you're asking questions about the way that their drains are working as a whole in the house. Do they have a clogged up a drain in the bathroom? Right,
Yeah.
like just to give the example, there was a clogged drain in the house. I am not a plumber, right? I don't. I'm My claim to fame is it's not that I can't do it, I don't want to, right?
Yeah.
Like that's usually my thing. It's not that I can't, I just don't want to.
Yeah.
So, but the short to that is after having to take some stuff apart and using an auger and all this other stuff, it probably was an hour's worth of fix, right?
Right.
So we were able to do it in house. But if it would have exceeded an hour, the next time something happened with that drain, we would have just paid somebody because
Right.
I'm not going to spend 5 hours doing it wrong, right? When
Right.
I could pay someone else to do it for 2 hours or an hour and it'd just be
Yeah.
done with it. But to go back to it, maybe I downloaded something about unclogging a bathroom drain, and now you're sending me information about the different things to keep drains from being clogged, how to get hair out,
Right.
when what to use, what not to use. Like you said, just nurturing the lead
Yeah.
is the term,
Yeah.
right? We want to nurture. Nurturing can be sales,
Yeah.
but it should never be, are you ready yet? It's not, yeah,
No,
that's
that
never,
drives me insane.
no, no. Do you have your card today? No, you didn't bring your cash? Okay. Well, I'm gonna go until you have your cash.
Right.
That's never a good sale. Yeah, that's
Right.
never good.
Well, Wendell, thanks so much. So, a couple questions before we get out of here. First off, is do you have a tool or a habit, something that you do every day that you feel adds a lot of value to your life, professional or personal?
That's a good question. So I have two. I have
Okay.
two. So it's not every day, but 3 days a week I work out,
Okay.
and it's not the workout part, it's the commitment, right? And
Yeah.
I've actually transitioned that in other parts of my life because no matter what, I work out 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So having the goal of 3 days a week and not necessarily looking at what the physical aesthetic is or how much weight I'm gonna lose, whatever it is, my goal is 3 days a week, right?
Okay.
So I work out 3 days a week. That is the thing that has actually changed the way that my day goes, because I realized 16 weeks into working out 3 days a week that, like, if I put this level of focus into other spaces, how many things could I get done? Right.
Exactly.
And it's just 3 days a week, and I work out for an hour. It's not groundbreaking. I'm not spending 3 hours in the gym. It's just an hour, 3 days a week.
Right.
But I do it you would have no understanding of this commitment.
Yeah.
So that would be the one thing is finding something to hone in on, not necessarily looking at the goal, but just looking at the habit. And the other thing that I've attrition to, again, over these within the last 12 months or so, is finding some sort of project management software. For me personally, that has completely revolutionized the game for me, is using a project management software that has due dates so that you can keep track of the things, even if it's personal stuff. Like, I put everything on there. I have a notification for me to do 30 minutes of language learning, right? So, yeah.
Nice.
I'm learning Spanish.
Oh, so, good.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I think that commitment, and sometimes we tend to look at the larger goal or where we want to be in a time. Right. It could be overwhelming and daunting. Where if we just we had this conversation earlier today with somebody that I used to have pretty nice fitness watch, but I didn't use all the bells and whistles on it. I just need something to count some steps. So I went back to the Fitbit, and they've got a new thing that it's like every hour 250 steps. And so you know how it is, sitting at a desk all day. I mean, and working from home, I could really do 500 steps a day if I'm not careful. So this thing here, it reminds me. And the great thing is at the end of the day, when maybe I get a chance to go for a walk, I've already got like 2,500 steps in just by taking those little incremental steps. So I think that's good to focus on what you could do today. And then after 16 weeks, like you said, all of a sudden it adds up. Yeah.
Yeah, turned around, looked up, and I was like, "Oh man, it's been 16 weeks I've been doing this. I can't believe it."
That's awesome.
I've done it off, and I've worked out off and on for years, but the only thing I focus on is not even this week. I just make sure my first day happens, and then there's been a couple of times where I couldn't do it 3 consecutive days in a row. But I always make sure I get my 3 days in.
Yeah, it's the old adage, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So,
exactly.
All right, Wendell. Well, thanks so much for giving of your time. It's been some great information. So, local SEO, marketing, I guess, of all kinds that you can help them with. Tell people who do you like to work with? What can you do for them? And then, of course, how can they reach out and get a hold of you?
Sure. So, the clients that I enjoy the most are those that have a local service area, right? So we use the pizza shop, the plumber, someone who's looking for local customers. What we do is ROI focused, right? So we make sure that there's a return on investment. If we don't believe that we can, make more than what we're charging you, we really won't do the project. Okay. The other part to that is our focus is organic, right? So we don't run ads, we don't do any of that kind of stuff. Everything that we do is based on content and making sure that we're bringing your brand voice. We're putting a loudspeaker on that. The best way to reach me is on the website, jordanmarketingconsultants.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Wendell Jordan Jr. It's this funny looking face. So wherever you find it, it's me. It's me.
All right, Wendell. Well, have a great rest of your day. We appreciate it. That's going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. Of course, you can find us at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. We're on all the major podcast platforms, iTunes, Stitcher, Google, Spotify. We're on all the major social media networks. Probably hang out on Instagram a little more than the others. So check us out over there. If you have any issues in your business that you'd like for us to address, please send me an email. We'd be glad to try to get a guest on that can help you. So until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your business.